This week, a Chinese automaker did something that shouldn't be possible. BYD unveiled a full-size electric SUV with a driving range of nearly 590 miles. And in China, it starts at roughly $35,000. Think about that for a second. Nearly 590 miles of range, a 3-row SUV, and a price that undercuts many electric vehicles with far less capability. Just a few years ago, numbers like that would have sounded unrealistic. Today, they're real enough to make the entire automotive industry pay attention. And that's bad news for Ford and General Motors, because both companies are still trying to solve one of the biggest problems in the EV business. How do you build long-range electric vehicles at prices ordinary buyers can actually afford? BYD may have found an answer. And if that answer works, the real story isn't this SUV. The real story is what happens when one company discovers a way to offer more range, more technology, and more value, while much of the industry is still struggling to make the economics work. That's the question Ford and GM now have to answer. On paper, Ford and General Motors should have nothing to worry about. These are companies that survived oil crises, economic recessions, financial crashes, and more than a century of change in the automotive industry. Ford produces millions of vehicles every year. GM operates on a global scale that most companies can only dream about. They have factories, supply chains, engineering teams, and decades of manufacturing experience. That's why a $35,000 Chinese SUV shouldn't be a serious threat, at least in theory, because history says companies this large don't lose their position overnight. But that's exactly what makes this story so interesting. The danger isn't that BYD built one impressive SUV. The danger is that it may have solved a problem Ford and GM are still struggling to solve. And if that's true, size alone may not be enough to protect them. Before we continue with the video and my further explanation about the challenge now facing Ford and General Motors, I'd like to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and support me. Okay, let's continue. The uncomfortable truth is that building electric vehicles is easy. Building profitable electric vehicles is not. That's the problem Ford and GM are still trying to solve. Because selling an EV isn't enough. You have to make money on it. And that's where the challenge begins. Long-range batteries are expensive, raw materials are expensive, manufacturing is expensive, and every extra mile of range usually pushes costs even higher. That's why many automakers face a difficult choice. Keep prices affordable or offer the kind of range buyers actually want. Doing both at the same time is incredibly difficult. And that's what makes this new BYD SUV so surprising. Because on paper, it appears to offer something the industry has struggled to combine: long range, large size, and a relatively affordable price. That's why this isn't just another vehicle launch. It's a question mark hanging over the entire industry. How exactly did BYD make the numbers work? And that's where BYD changes the story. Because BYD didn't solve this problem by building one breakthrough SUV. It solved it years before the SUV ever existed. Most automakers buy many of their critical components from outside suppliers: batteries, electronic systems, key parts of the EV drivetrain. That approach works, but it also adds cost. It adds complexity, and it limits control. BYD took a different path. Instead of depending heavily on others, it spent years building many of those capabilities in-house. The batteries, the manufacturing, the supply chain, large parts of the ecosystem itself. And that's the shock move, because the 590-mile SUV isn't the innovation, it's the outcome. The real innovation is the system that made the SUV possible. While many automakers were managing suppliers, BYD was building an industrial machine designed specifically for the EV era. And that's what makes this launch so important. Not what the SUV is, but what it reveals. Ford's problem isn't that BYD built a better SUV. Ford has built great vehicles for generations. The problem is what happens when a competitor changes the economics of the market. Because for years, Ford's biggest advantage was scale. Huge factories, massive production volumes, a global manufacturing network. Those strengths helped Ford become one of the most successful automakers in history. But the EV era is creating a different kind of competition, because scale only matters if it creates an advantage. And that's where BYD becomes dangerous. If BYD can offer more range, competitive technology, and aggressive pricing while maintaining healthy margins, it changes the equation entirely. Suddenly, Ford isn't competing against another vehicle. It's competing against a cost structure, and cost structures are much harder to beat than products, because products come and go. But if a competitor can consistently build EVs more efficiently, the pressure never stops. General Motors faces a different challenge, because GM isn't just competing in the EV market, it's trying to reinvent itself around it. And that's one of the hardest things any company can do. For more than a century, GM built its success around gasoline vehicles, its factories, its supply chains, its engineering expertise, its business model. All of it was designed for a different era. Now the company is trying to transform that foundation while still competing in the present. And that's where BYD becomes dangerous. Because BYD isn't balancing two worlds. It isn't trying to protect yesterday's business while building tomorrow's. It was built for the EV era from the beginning. That gives BYD something incredibly valuable: focus. And in industries going through major transitions, focused companies often move faster than companies trying to reinvent themselves. That's why this challenge is bigger than one SUV. It's about who can adapt fastest. Tesla's challenge is different from Ford's, and it's different from GM's, because Tesla wasn't supposed to be the company under pressure. For years, Tesla was the disruptor, the company everyone else was trying to catch. It moved faster, it launched faster, it scaled faster, and that speed became one of Tesla's greatest advantages. But advantages become less powerful when competitors start adopting the same playbook. And that's exactly what makes BYD so dangerous. Because BYD isn't trying to beat Tesla using traditional automotive thinking. It's competing using speed. New factories, new products, new battery technologies, new markets, again and again. And that's creating a question Tesla hasn't had to answer for a long time. What happens when you're no longer the only company moving faster than the rest of the industry? Because once multiple companies can innovate at scale, leadership becomes much harder to defend. Not because Tesla suddenly became weaker, but because the gap is becoming smaller. The biggest mistake Ford, GM, and Tesla could make is focusing only on this SUV, because the SUV isn't the real story. 5 years from now, this specific vehicle may be forgotten. There will be newer models, better batteries, more advanced technology. That's normal. What isn't normal is what this SUV reveals. It reveals that a company can combine long range, aggressive pricing, and large-scale production in a way many competitors are still struggling to achieve. And that's why this launch matters. Not because of one product, but because it may be evidence of a larger shift taking place across the industry. The real threat isn't the SUV. The real threat is a system capable of producing more SUVs like it, again and again and again. Because once a company proves it can repeat an advantage, that advantage stops being a headline and starts becoming a competitive weapon. And this is why this story matters far more than most people realize. Because the real story isn't about a 590-mile SUV. It isn't about a $35,000 price tag. And it isn't even about BYD. The real story is about a problem the rest of the industry is still trying to solve. For years, automakers believed there was a trade-off. If you wanted long range, costs went up. If you wanted affordability, compromises followed. That was the reality of the EV market. But what happens when one company starts breaking that equation? That's why Ford, GM, and Tesla are paying attention. Not because this SUV proves BYD has already won, and not because Ford, GM, or Tesla are suddenly doomed. The real concern is what happens if BYD can repeat this again and again and again. Because one successful vehicle is a headline. A repeatable system is a threat. Ford still has scale. GM still has resources. Tesla still has technology, brand recognition, and enormous influence. None of those advantages disappear overnight. But if BYD has truly found a way to combine long range, competitive pricing, and profitable production at scale, then this SUV may be remembered as something much bigger than a product launch. It may be remembered as the moment the rest of the industry realized the gap was growing faster than expected. And if that gap continues to widen through 2026, the balance of power in the global EV market could start looking very different. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and supports more videos like this. Thanks for watching.